Hey there, namaste and welcome. My name is Elena and the video today is about Sophie du Plantea, the brutal murder that shocked the whole country and triggered one of the biggest murder investigations that Ireland had ever seen. A tragic event that took place in one of the most beautiful places ever. It became an instant national obsession, so with no further ado, let's dive right in. Madame Sophie du Plantea was a French TV producer. She had a son from a previous marriage, Pierre-Louis Vignod, before she married Daniel du Plantea, who himself was a very well-connected film producer. They both had very busy lives, and she was a social elite in Paris, but in Ireland, she was just Sophie. She had previously visited Ireland in her childhood and she liked it very much. So much so that she would later buy a holiday home near County Cork in Ireland to lead a quiet life at times away from all the glamorous city life, where she would introspect and reflect just the way she liked it, in tranquility. Relatable much, but before that she had two options that she could have chosen from for her holiday home, and she went for the most secluded one, where the light from the lighthouse pretty much hit her bedroom, and she had ordered her bedroom to be set in such a way that she could have gone for a light night reading at times whenever she wanted to. The downside, anyone in the area at night would have watched her and she wouldn't even know about it. She also lived alone to work on her project there, but this time when she came to stay for a few days, she had actually invited every family member that she could get her hands on to join her, but unfortunately they were not available. Nobody thought much of it as she would be coming back for Christmas anyway, but only she couldn't be coming back. And nobody knew whatever happened until it happened. On a chilly night of 23rd of December 1996, Sophie was murdered in cold blood outside her holiday home. She was 39 years old. Now if we look at the murder scene, her keys were in the back of the door inside of the house. So it seemed that the killer, whoever it was, had somehow lured her outside of the house and committed such heinous crime to the point that when the neighbor first saw her, they couldn't even identify that it was Sophie at the first sight. It was that bad. Pathologists had arrived 28 hours later and found horrendous injuries to her body and face, laceration marks, blunt force trauma. Her face had been battered with a concrete block. Her fingers were broken. Maybe she was trying to defend herself from the attacker, so there was blood everywhere. The gate, thorny bushes nearby, so whoever had done it did it dirty. Now there lived a killer amongst the tight-knit Irish community. But who did it? And whoever did it, what was the motive if there was one after all? Ian Bailey from Manchester, who had changed his name from Owen to Ian, enters the picture. He actually transferred to Ireland in 1991 and lived with his partner Jules Thomas in Golan from 1992 onwards, just a few miles away from where Sophie lived. Ian was a freelance journalist who did poetry here and there, and he was one of the first people who visited the crime scene and did a cover story on it pretty soon. But being a journalist, he didn't ask no questions to anybody there. Instead, witnesses claimed that he was acting rather strangely. Although he denied knowing Sophie beforehand, he would go on to cover the crime story just 5 days later, claiming that Sophie had a number of lovers and that one of those ex-lovers had her killed. Although he denied knowing Sophie beforehand, which is debatable, he would go on to cover the crime story just 5 days later, claiming that she had a number of lovers, she loved to party, and that one of those ex-lovers had her killed. And the other story string that he pulled was that as she was divorcing Daniel, from which she would gain much more than one can imagine, so it was Daniel who had hired a hitman and had her killed. Daniel, on the other hand, didn't come to Ireland, but he was devastated that Sophie was gone. News had traveled fast. The Garda, or the guards, were already on the move. Everyone was shell-shocked by the audacity of the killer that had rattled the quite easy breezy neighborhood. Policemen were doing home-to-home inquiries, but to no avail. No DNA or fingerprints was found there to rely on, but as the sources go, they did find blood droplets other than that of Sophie's on the crime scene, but back then they needed more than just a droplet to go for the further investigations, so it wasn't much to begin with, rather than just some circumstantial evidence, which isn't reliable either. A week later, a lady named Fiona had called the police claiming that there was a man on the Kilfada Bridge at night, in the night of the murder, waving hands, howling at the moon, and acting crazy. Later, the lady would call again, and this time, as she had phoned from her home unintentionally, so she was traced back as a local named Marie Farrell, who would be a key eyewitness. And the guy she had spotted turned out to be Ian Bailey, the journalist, who she later claimed would be threatening her with her life if she wouldn't stop taking his name. As a matter of fact, the only credible suspect in this case was Ian Bailey. He actually had cuts on his hand and his forehead as well, but when questioned, he would blame it to Christmas tree cutting and turkey hunting for his wounds, which wasn't believable much. But few years later, Marie would contradict her earlier testimony, saying that it was in fact the guards who had coerced her into taking Ian Bailey's name as the madman that she had witnessed on the night of the murder. So all this drama underwent. 50 plus suspects were narrowed down to 10 with no physical evidence. Remember the iron gate from the crime scene? The police had actually lost the iron gate. I mean, what the heck? Maybe that's where policemen being corrupted comes into play. Another plot that went around was that Sophie had been in the haunted Three Castle Head area earlier that day and had actually seen some strange thing, probably the White Lady. And she was so disturbed about it that she went to her friend Yvonne and told her all about it. But as Yvonne herself was an outsider, she wasn't much aware about the Irish legend herself. And as the legend goes, whoever witnessed the White Lady goes through immediate violent death. Sophie wasn't much aware about the legend herself, so she went back home. Had any other Irish people known about the fact that she had seen White Lady that day, they would definitely have stopped her from going back home, and perhaps the whole tragic event would have been avoided. But be that as it may, the whole community seemed to know who did it. I mean, the scratch marks on Ian Bailey's arms, his forehead, and the fact that he was seen by the witness on the night of the murder, in very close proximity to where Sophie had been staying. Also his violent outburst against his ex-partner Jules Thomas, so much so that he had to be hospitalized. Plus, he even confessed killing Sophie to a bunch of people while he was emotionally unstable himself. And the following morning, why was there a fire pit at the back of Ian's studio? I reckon it's more than just a mattress. Also, the town's not that populated, and he denied knowing Sophie. I mean, not everybody knows everybody, but the thing is, he knew key facts about the murder even before police or journalists knew about it. So that's highly debatable. And the fact that he was so engulfed in this crime right from the start, and all the stories that he cooked, cannot be overlooked. Also, the other thing is that while guards were doing home-to-home inquiries, in the initial statement, Jules Thomas and her then boyfriend Bailey had given statements that Bailey had been in bed all night. But later on, Jules Thomas retracted that account, saying that Bailey went out and returned home later that night with new injuries on his forehead. So basically what I gathered is that sometimes Bailey was a drunk, sexist, violent misogynist. At other times he was a desperate, narcissistic attention seeker. So I do not know which side of him wins, but after watching this Netflix show, A Murder in West Cork, which also partly inspired me to make this video, I believe Ian Bailey is guilty, or maybe he's just a schizophrenic. Let me know what you think in the comment section. All in all, this whole eerie ordeal was a media frenzy, but although in 2007 the Association for the Truth on the Murder of Sophie was founded by her family to advance the investigation, just because the Gardas weren't quick enough to prevent the evidence fiasco or some dumb luck, the killer's still on the loose. As for Bailey, Ireland never put him on trial, as no charges were filed against him due to the lack of the physical evidence, and so Ian Bailey on the present day roams around freely in Ireland reading to people his pieces of some scribbling that he calls poetry. May I get the opportunity to cover this story again, saying that the culprit has been caught? I'll take my leave. Take care till I see you in my next video. Bye.